Hello everybody, and thanks for checking out my review. Today I'm going to be doing part 3 in a series of smartwatch reviews. This walkthrough I'm going to be using the Tag Heuer Connected to demonstrate all of the onboard settings for Wear OS and how it works with the iPhone. So the first thing you want to know is when you get these watches is you want to either press the power or the crown button, or you just want to plug it in so this way you can get up to the setup screen, so this way you can get everything all set to your liking. While this is loading up, a quick background on Wear OS. 2017, Google updated the operating system to Wear 2.0, and in 2018, they changed the name of the platform from Android Wear to WearOS. This updated it to a much cleaner, more intuitive experience, and it works much better with iOS. So this walkthrough is going to focus mainly on interaction using an iPhone. I'm going to be using the iPhone 11 Pro. I'm going to have iOS 13.4.1, and WearOS does work with iPhone 5 or later, and at least iOS 9 installed. You also want to know that if you want to purchase a watch that uses Wear OS, you want to make sure it's compatible with iPhone. So don't count on the salespeople to tell you. If you're interested in a Wear OS watch, first Google for that watch and iPhone, and then you're going to find out quickly if they work together. So the initial setup is easy. I'm going to go through the walkthrough of the watch, download Wear OS from the App Store onto the phone, and we're going to continue the setup from there. All right, so to get everything set up, the first thing you're going to want to do is tap to begin. So you're going to start off the process on the watch. You're going to confirm the language. And then you can confirm the terms of service on the website. And then what you want to do is go and continue it on the phone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up on the phone. There's going to be certain points. Sometimes it's a little bit slow moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the camera and just restart it. So we're going to start off with the terms of service on the phone. Agree to everything. I typically say no thanks to the diagnostics. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect the watch. So all you have to do is tap on the Tag Heuer 46E6. And you'll see that on the screen on the watch as well. And what it's going to do is it's going to connect to Bluetooth. And then you're going to see that confirmation with the pairing request. So I'm going to pair them up. And then we're going to get the confirmation code to connect. So everything matches up. So I'm going to confirm. And now what it's going to do is it's going to get the watch details and it's going to kind of sync back and forth and then have me sign in. So now the next thing it's going to do is it's going to have me connect to my Wi-Fi through the phone. So this way it can connect on the watch. So I'm going to connect to my Wi-Fi. I'm going to put in my Wi-Fi password and press join. So now that it's connected, it's going to go through the setup process. So I'm going to choose my Google account here and continue as myself. And now it's going to copy the account information over to my watch. And then it's going to have me confirm my password. And then it's going to sync my calendar. And I ask for permission to get access to the calendar. I press OK. I'm going to allow it to give me notifications at a glance, so it gets a confirmation. And then it lets me contact my friends through the watch. This is going to take a little while. Could take up to about 5 minutes. And now everything's all set up, and I'm going to allow Wear OS app to always access my location. I'm going to skip that. Typically, I let it do it just when I'm in the application. Then the next question is allow Tag to display my iPhone notifications. I do allow that, of course. And now I'm all set. So the first thing I'm going to do before I get into the setup on the watch, because it's going to go through the tutorials and I'm going to go past that, is I'm going to just show you the settings that you could use the application for. All right, so now everything's all set up, and you'll notice that every once in a while I'm going to be touching the screen. It's because the screen dims out like it just did right now, and it gets too dark to see the screen with the bright light. So if I'm touching it periodically, just bear with me on that. That's the only reason that's going on. So what I did was I went past the tutorials that the watch was giving you. It takes a couple of minutes to go through. It's really handy, and it's really nice to have that feature when you're just getting the watch and you don't know how to use it, but I'll be doing this tutorial on the camera, of course. Just to give you a quick walkthrough on the settings that you can work with from the iPhone to the watch. You'll see, obviously, everything's all connected. Everything's good to go. So if you hit the top left, of the screen, you're going to see the option to set up a new watch, a little about information, so it just gives you information about the application. If you go down a little bit, you'll have the choice on which watch faces you want to use. So if I go into the More screen here, it gives me all 5 watch faces that are currently on the watch itself. So I can go to the Carbon watch, and you'll notice that it changes it up right away. So everything pretty much hits immediately. This watch and WearOS and working with the iPhone is very responsive back and forth. So that's the first part. When you go back, you can go into what's called the tiles. And what the tiles are is when you swipe from the right to the left, you're going to have these little screens here that'll give you more information. So you could set them either from the phone or the watch. I'm going to walk you through both. So the first thing you'd want to do is press the little plus button on the bottom right hand of the screen. And I could put in my agenda for the second screen. I can go in and I could put in my heart rate for the third screen. I could put in weather for the fourth screen. And you're allowed up to 5 screens to be able to do this. So then I can go into my headlines. And then if I felt one thing was more important than the other, what you could do is just drag the weather to the top, for instance. You can move the sports to the last, headlines to the second. You can adjust how you want these to go onto the screen. So that's the first section. The second thing is your notifications. So if you have additional applications on here, the notifications gives you an opportunity to let you know which apps are going to be able to be notified on the watch. So for instance, if you have WhatsApp, if you have Skype, if you have different things that are compatible between the phone and the watch, those are the notifications that can go through. The calendar is going to give me a choice on what calendar I want to use. So I'm going to use the Apple calendar. And then I have the Google Assistant, and it allows me to get the application for my iPhone. I don't typically use that because I have Siri, of course, and then I have my advanced settings, and the advanced settings let me know what accounts I have on the watch. I can add accounts. I have privacy settings, so if I didn't want to send the diagnostic information, which I typically keep off, I can go into that setting. I have watch battery, so it'll tell me what the watch battery level is at and what apps might be using a lot of the battery if I'm finding that I'm not getting good battery life. Just a quick note on battery. Typically when you first get these watches, the battery is going to go fast because it's indexing. It's setting things up. You're going to tend to use it a lot more. Once you settle in after a couple of days, you're going to notice a lot better battery life, no matter what watch you have. And then you have the always on screen, so you can give it the choice of always on or turning that off. You can obviously set on the watch, and then you have tilt to wake, which is basically every time you are wearing the watch and you tilt it over to look at the screen, you'll notice that the screen gets brighter for you. So that's the main stuff that you could do with the application. All right, so now that we have everything set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the gestures, the notifications. I'm going to walk you through the applications. I'm going to walk you through everything about this watch. Now, just to give you an example of how quick a message goes through, I'm going to send a message to myself, turn the phone off, and once it ends up going through like it just did on my phone, it went through just as quick on my watch, and you'll see it brightens it up. So if I wanted to just go in and see what the message was real quick, I can see what it is. If I want to get rid of it, I can just swipe to the right and it clears it off. So just to go into the first gesture, you have a long press. So when you do a long press, you're going to be able to change your watch face. So if you go left and right, you can switch to the watch face that you want. And every watch that you're going to purchase tends to have different watch faces. Some of them have the standard Google watch faces, but for the most part, they have proprietary ones. The next thing I'm going to show you is the gestures. So if you swipe from the top down, that's going to take you to a quick setting screen. So I'm going to get to that shortly. And then if you go from the bottom up, you're going to notice that I have my notifications. So you'll have your text messages, you'll have emails, calendar events, reminders. It includes iMessage too from the iPhone. So that's the nice thing is that Google used to not be able to get that onto the watch. They somehow worked it out. So now if I swipe from the left to the right, I'm going to get what's called the Google Assistant feed. So it's going to give me information that it feels that I want to see on the screen here. And so it's going to give me my weather, because weather, I'm always looking at the weather on these watches. It gives me the forecast. It gives me reminders, news, and then quotes of the day. So that's a really handy feature. I use it a lot more than I thought I would, actually. And then I scroll to the right, and these are those tiles that I had set up earlier on the phone. So I can also set these tiles up that if I wanted to get rid of the tile over here, I could just swipe it up and I could add another tile. And don't forget, you're allowed to have 5 tiles on here. So if I wanted to add on workout here, now that goes on there. And then I could swipe left and right for the new tiles. And then if I wanted to move that, there's little arrows here when you long press. So I can move it to the left and I can make that the first tile that I'm going to see when I swipe to that right. All right, so next up, I'm going to go into all the settings on the watch. Keep in mind, this is basically a small computer that fits on your wrist. So when I'm walking through a lot of these settings, I'm going to glance over some of them that are not as important or not as usable, and I'm going to demonstrate a lot of them, though, for you. So the first thing I'm going to get into is the quick settings. I'm going to take this off the charger. So when I swipe down, the first thing I can go to is do not disturb mode. So the do not disturb is obviously it turns off all of the notifications. So this way, if I'm in a meeting or if I'm in an environment that I don't want to be disrupted, I could just turn off all notifications. I won't get disrupted. You have theater mode. So theater mode is going to simply turn the screen off and it's going to turn it back on only when you're pressing the crown or the power button, depending on what type of watch that you have. You have Google Pay. So if you like to pay with NFC, I have of course, the iPhone, the Apple Watch, so I could use my Apple Pay. But this is a good alternative. So if I, for some reason, do not have one of my devices, I can use this and be able to pay something at the counter at the store that I go to. Airplane mode, of course, turns off all of the radios. I have a quick brightness mode, so this way I can just turn it up or turn it down. And then there's a secondary brightness mode I'm going to get into. You have a power saver mode. So the battery saver is going to only show the time. So what I would end up doing is I would press this and it's going to exit. It's literally going to restart the watch. And then when the watch comes on, the only thing I'm going to see is a watch face. I'm not going to get any notifications. It's actually a pretty nice watch face too. This is if you're running really low on the battery or if you're away for a couple of days and you're not near a charging puck. This gives you the opportunity to be able to, and it's really hard to see. Again, that just comes down to the brightness, but it just basically gives you a simple dial. In this case, it's got the Tag Heuer logo on the top there. So if I want to turn that mode off, what I have to do is once I get to the charging puck, it restarts the watch, and this way I can charge it to full. So really the only reason that you're going to go into that battery saver mode is if the battery is dying out on you, and if you're at like 5% battery and you just want to be able to have the time access. So like I said, once you get home, you plug it in and you get it to full, and then you could take it off the battery saver automatically as soon as it's plugged into the puck or the charger. So now we're going to go into the settings. And the settings, there's a lot involved here, like I said earlier. So they're all broken down into sections and then subsections. So I'm going to go into each setting for you. And we're going to start off with the display. And the display is going to give you a number of functions that you could go directly to anything display related. So for instance, and you're going to find that there's multiple ways to change certain settings. For instance, to change watch face. Obviously I showed you the long press earlier, and then I press here and I could change my watch faces off of here as well. Go back into the settings, and then you have in the display section, adjust brightness. So this is a little deeper than the two-touch thing that I showed you earlier. This actually allows you to bring it down to 1 through 5 settings. And then you have automatic. And the automatic, unfortunately, it's a very dim and darker lights. So I don't tend to use that unless I'm going outside. When I'm outdoors, that auto brightness is definitely handy because when it's the brighter it is, the brighter the screen gets. So right now I'm under the bright lights. Automatic is just fine. Typically though, I keep the setting on 3. Sunlight boost. So this also helps you when you're outside. It automatically brightens the watch to full screen brightness. So in direct sunlight, it's easier to see the watch faces. Font size. So you could change the size of the font. So the smaller font obviously gives you a lot more screen to play around with. I always keep mine on normal. And the nice thing is it gives you a preview. And then you have your large. And anytime you want to go back when you're in a setting, for instance, when I'm in that font, you can just swipe back and that'll take you right back into the main settings screen here. So you have the choice of always on screen. And the nice thing is it also warns you, for instance, when I go into full, it gives me always on screen, reduces battery life. So it gives me a reminder that if I go into that setting, it could diminish my battery life. And then touch lock, it basically turns off my touch, so I can't touch the screen. It goes into a dim mode, so this way it kind of saves the battery life as well. To turn that off, I just touch the crown and that takes it out of that setting. So that's it for the display. So now I can go into apps and notifications. So the apps and notifications are going to give me different ways that I can configure each application. So the app info, the first thing that's going to show up is any downloaded applications. So if I go into the watchmaker, it allows me to uninstall, force stop, permissions, and you'll see permissions in another section there. So the permissions allow it to use sensors or receive complication data. There's advanced settings that you can go into here, and some of them are grayed off if it's not relevant to the application that I'm using. And by the way, that's the easiest way to uninstall as well. System applications. So when you go in here, I can go in and I could set it up to where fit. I could remove any upgrades that came through, and same thing. I could force stop, go into the advanced settings, and change the different things. Again, if it's not relevant, it's going to be grayed out, so I can't touch anything with it. App notifications. So it's going to show me all the applications that have notifications set up. And there is a weird little bug in WearOS. So for instance, you'll notice I'm using the crown to navigate most of them. This one, it won't let me do it for some weird reason. But basically, if I go into the notifications, for instance, if I hit the flashlight, right now it's set up for notification. There's no notification that would come through on this, but where that would be really handy is, for instance, if I have WhatsApp, if I have Venmo, and any type of an outside application, that's where the notifications will show up in that notification center that shows me the text messages and emails. So I could turn that off, let's say, and then I go back into this section and I could show disabled, and it allows me to turn it back on right from that section. App permissions, and this is similar to what we were talking about in the app info. So the permissions are going to give me the ability to be able to set sensors, storage, receive complication data. Same with the system applications. So for instance, if I go into the fitness application, it'll allow me to change it to where if I wanted to or not wanted to turn on the heartbeat center. And you'll notice there's different little setups here for each application where it's relevant. Notification previews. This is going to allow it to where it's always going to show. So if a notification goes in, it doesn't disappear. It just stays on the screen. The normal is what I keep it on. It briefly shows the application, so it pops up and then it goes away as quick as it came in. And then off is never show. And what's going to happen is when I go into the main screen, I'll see a little dot on the bottom of the screen, and that'll tell me that I have a notification, and then I could just go up and check it. Then you have do not disturb when off the wrist. And what that means is when I take it off the wrist, it doesn't send any notifications through whatsoever. So this way, if I'm keeping the watch down, nobody can just pick up the watch and see what notifications might be coming through. But I can override that. So if there's specific application, like for instance, reminders, events, or alarms that I need it to go off, so especially alarms, for instance, that's something I would want to keep that application active. And then I could change the vibration pattern. Unfortunately, it's a low volume on it, so you're not really going to hear what the pattern is. But basically, you could set it up to simply short little vibration on the wrist, a long one, or two long double vibrations on the wrist. So I just keep it onto long, so this way it just gets my attention. All right, so next up is you have gestures. And what the gestures are is while it allows you to interact during the day when the watch is on your wrist. So for instance, I have tilt to wake here, and it warns you again, tilt to wake is going to reduce the battery life. So I say, okay. And what that ultimately does is when I'm walking around with it on my wrist, I'm typically going to have a darker screen. When I move it towards my face, the screen brightens up and it shows me the complications. Once I turn the wrist away, after a couple of seconds, it goes back to dim. The thing about tilt to wake and why it warns you about that battery life is because a lot of times when you're doing certain things during the day, you might turn the wrist and keep activating the screen. So that's why it gives you that warning. And then your next up is you have a power saver tilt, which works the opposite way. So when I go to activate and look at the complications and the brighter screen, as soon as I move my wrist away, the screen goes back to dim automatically. So it saves a little bit more power Saves a little battery life. And then it's going to tell you to choose a power saver watch face, and that usually works hand in hand with the power saver tilt. So what that means is when I go into my watch faces, this screen right here has a lot of graphics. It's a bit bright. It's got a lot of colors to it. So this is going to tend to use a lot more battery life, plus the second hand is constantly moving. So what'll happen is I can go into a darker screen. So I downloaded something off of Watchmaker, and if you notice, it's a really dark screen. There's very little movement to it, so I'm going to tend to get a lot more battery power out of this because it's not running as many pixels at any given time. So that's what that setting means in the gestures. Going back in, you have touch to wake. So rather than having to press the crown or the power button to wake it up, you could just touch the screen and it automatically wake it up for you. And typically I keep the tilt to wake and the touch to wake on. A lot of people just turn off the tilt to wake and just use the touch to wake, but it's kind of hard to see the if you're in a darker room, it's easier to see, but if you're in a brighter room, it's really hard to see what the screen is when it's dimmed out. So that's why I typically keep the tilt to wake on. Wrist gestures is an interesting setting in this. So they actually give you a tutorial so you know how to use it. And what it does is it allows you to navigate around the screen flicking the wrist. So for instance, it's telling me right now, flick my wrist to the right. So if I flip it over, it activates, and then it's going to tell me flick it again, and that's going to scroll through my screens there. So it tells me that I did it right. And then you have the flick the screen in, which does exactly the same thing, except it goes the opposite way. So it activates, and then when I flick it in, it scrolls the opposite direction. And then there's a third one that when I shake, it exits. So it exits whatever application I'm in. So just to give you an example, when I use that gesture, I can go in here and it automatically goes into the notifications. And then the other way around, it goes into my quick settings. So it's a pretty cool little feature there. Next up is connectivity. So what that does is it controls all of your radios. So you have Bluetooth that's obviously going to communicate with my phone. And then I could check available devices if there's other phones that I wanted to connect this to, or I can hook it up with my iPhone and my iPad. If you have an Android, you could hook it up with an Android and a tablet. Then you have your Wi-Fi. Now the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth work interestingly. If I'm not doing anything that needs high speed, typically it's going to turn the Wi-Fi off automatically. To my understanding, Android keeps the Wi-Fi on full time, but pretty much if I'm just looking at my watch, looking at simple connections, it's just going to use my Bluetooth off my phone to work with me, just like I would in the street. If I'm home, the only time it really activates on the Wi-Fi is when I go into the Google Play Store, or if I'm using anything that's intensive, like if I'm using the Google Assistant or Translate feature. And this also allows me to add a network, and if I add a network, it actually lets me key in the password on that network as well. Then it gives me a list of my saved networks, and then it tells me about Wi-Fi, just basic information. So that's your connections. Next up, you have NFC. And NFC, I typically turn it off because I don't use the Google Pay. But if you use Google Pay, you can keep it turned on, and then it allows you to tap and pay. Airplane mode from this section as well. And then you could turn on or off the location. So when you're doing activities, it could track the GPS. You could just turn that off and it won't track your movement or where you're at. So that's it for the connectivity. Next up is one accessibility feature, magnify the gesture. So all you'd have to do is triple tap on the screen to zoom. And it'll zoom in on the section that you tap onto. So I'll disable that. All right, so next up is general. So if I go into the general settings, I could choose to have a red dot for unread notifications. So for instance, I go in here, you'll see the dot on the bottom of the screen. And then when I go into the notification, read it, get out of it, then the red dot is gone. Also allows me to auto launch media controls. So for instance, if I'm watching a YouTube video, if I'm watching a regular movie, if I'm listening to music or pretty much anything, it allows me to go forward, go back, or pause the media that I'm watching. And then there's a watch tutorial that basically walks you through all the settings if you wanted to just get a refresher on that. Personalization. So this allows you to lock the screen with a pattern, PIN, or password. So I'll set one up, for instance. So if I go in, you have to touch 4 dots, and then it confirms it. And that basically locks the screen from any notifications from showing unless I go back in and unlock that screen. And it'll show me what I'm looking for. And if I want to turn that off, I enter the pattern, it confirms it, and it turns it off for me. And same thing with PIN or password. Input methods. This is basically if I'm doing anything, like for instance, setting a password, it gives me a keyboard to be able to type on. It's very small, but it actually is pretty effective. And then you have handwriting input, and I'm going to say that's for typically if you have an Android device, because of the fact that you cannot reply to notifications on an Android device, you can. That's where that would come in handier. And then you can manage your keyboards if you have different keyboards added into here from different applications that you could download. Your accounts, so you could just verify your account, remove it, and add another account. You can customize the hardware buttons if your watch has it. So for instance, right now, I have it set up for agenda and weather, but if I wanted to change that up, I can go in and change it to alarm. I could send the other to contacts or fit breathe. And then when I go into the main screen here, it goes into the alarm or the breathe application. You have a smart reply function, and that's basically, once again, if you have an Android, you set up those smart replies on the Android, and then you could just have it where it automatically starts giving you words that you'd automatically want to put into the message to reply. And then you have OK Google detection. So anytime I say OK Google, the Google Assistant can come up, and then I could find out basic information. It's kind of like Hey Siri. And then you have device administration. So it basically has you go in there and you can manage the settings, remote locate device. So this way, if you lose the watch, you could use your Android phone to find it. So the storage, it's going to give you the full data size on what's taking up the most amount of space on the watch. And then it'll give you information on each individual application or anything that's in this watch. It'll give you information on that. And then it also shows you updates as well. So if I go into Google handwriting input, it's going to give me the version. It's going to give me the ability to remove any upgrades, clear the data, clear the cache. So this way it keeps every application nice and fresh if I wanted to do that. Then you have the system. So going into the system, you have your battery life, and the battery life is going to give you the percentage and then allow you to go into that battery saver mode that I talked about earlier that basically just turns the screen off. You could set that from your quick settings as well. You have your time and your date, so you can have them set automatically. So if you're going from, for instance, from the West Coast to the East Coast or back and forth, it'll change those time zones for you automatically. And then you can manually set the time and date as well if you choose by scrolling down, and then you can go into 12 and 24 format as well. I choose to keep those on. You could restart, so if you're having any issues with the watch, if for some reason your battery life, if there's problems with connectivity, basically you just restart and reboot and it just starts up nice and fresh for you. You have power off, that just turns the watch off altogether. If you press disconnect and reset, it's going to disconnect from your phone. It's going to restore the phone to factory settings. Then you have the about information, so that gives you your serial number, versions, everything that you have as far as the firmware or WearOS on the watch. And then regulatory information, it's the typical stuff that you'd get on like the back of a box, so it just makes it handy on the watch so you don't have to actually put it on the watch. And that's it for all your settings. So basically, if you have any questions on any of these settings, put it in the comments section. I'm happy to answer it. And now I'm going to move on to the applications. All right, so now I'm going to go into the applications, and what you want to do is press the application button. In this case, it's the crown. Takes you right over to the applications. And what it's typically going to do is it's going to give you the last 3 applications that you used. It's going to give you your favorites, and then it's going to go down into the rest of them in alphabetical order. So First of all, I'm just going to go over the onboard applications. I'm going to probably do future review videos to go over specific apps that I've downloaded that you might find interesting. But I just wanted to go over the main stuff that comes with the watch right off the bat. So we'll start off with the flashlight. And when you go in there, it automatically just brightens up the screen. So this way, if you're in a dark room, it just lets you see if it's completely pitch black. You can turn it on and off by touching the screen. And then the nice thing about these applications is you swipe back, it gets you back into the applications. The next up is weather. So it uses your GPS or your Wi-Fi and it determines what town that you're in. And then it gives you the temperature, the weather conditions, the wind speed, the rain conditions. And then it gives you the forecast for the next 4 days. And it gathers that off of weather.com. Then you have the Google Play Store. And what it's going to do is connect to my Wi-Fi. Sometimes I get a little error message, but it's always going to connect to my Wi-Fi. And then it gives you different subjects that you might be interested in downloading. So you have featured applications, for instance. Tells you what's pretty much popular out there. Get it done. So this is stuff for note-taking, documents. I'll give you an example. I'm going to download Calculator. So I install it. Goes pretty quick. And then once the installation is on the watch, it'll let you open it. And then I'll show you how responsive the screen is too. So if I put in 4 times 5 equals, and that's it. And then you can zero out. So it's just good if you just need some quick calculations. And going back into the Play Store. Now, here's the thing. It shows uninstall here, but I'm just going to give you a heads up. If you wanted to uninstall an app, just to give you a good piece of advice, go into the settings, go into the apps and notifications, go into the app info, and you're going to see the calculator. You're going to touch that, uninstall, and that's what's going to get rid of the application. I don't know why they have that setting in the store, but you really can't delete an application from the store. It was driving me nuts on an application I was trying to delete. And then it allows you to do updates off of that as well. So if you back off and you go back in here, it's going to show you the applications that you've downloaded, including updates from the operating system. It's going to give you the accounts, and then it'll give you the settings. So it'll auto update the applications. It can ask you for a PIN for purchases. So it's a really good application. A lot of really good apps in there. It's building. It's definitely growing. They could definitely use a lot more, but I like it right now. But I'll go into the stopwatch here, and I don't know. One thing about these watches is a lot of the manufacturers put apps specific to their brands. So I believe that Tag Heuer put this one on here, and I start it, and it acts like a regular watch. I can use the buttons to start and stop the stopwatch on this case. But I believe that they typically customize their own applications for these. So that's how the stopwatch works. You can go into the timer. And the same deal. You can set your minutes, your seconds. And if you want to start it, pause it, and then reset it. You have your agenda. So this will give you the events that you have coming up. And then getting into the alarm. Alarm is really easy to set. So if I wanted to add an alarm here, I just move the arrow around to the time that I want. So if I want to wake up at 7:50, and it gives me a confirmation and a time to where I can set it up to where if I want to go into specific dates, or if I just want to do it once a week, I could just have it go off on weekdays, or I could have it go off on the weekends. But basically, once I have that set, I go back, it confirms it, and the time is set. And then if I wanted to get rid of it, I go back into the alarm. So if I wanted to get rid of this alarm, I long press it, I confirm delete, and that alarm is deleted. So the alarm works really nicely. Contacts, I'm not going to show you that because I have a lot of my friends in there, but basically that's going to give you all of the information from your friends list that you would find on your phone. So you're going to get email address, phone numbers, home address, anything that you have in there. Find My Phone. So what's going to happen is when you put the Find My Phone, it's going to actually give you time to back out of it. So if you didn't really lose your phone, but if you did lose your phone and you want to try to find it, it's going to ring it like an actual phone call is coming in. And there you go. And you can stop it right from the watch. So this way it doesn't keep ringing. You have the Fit Breathe app, so it works similar to how WatchOS does it. And I'm just going to walk you through the setup because anything that you're going to want to use with Fit, it wants specific information in here. I'm going to blur out some information like I did earlier as far as my personal information, but it's a pretty straightforward setup. So it's going to give you a little welcome screen, and it's going to ask you for some specific information. And then what's nice is all the information from Fit, you choose your account, all the information from Fit ends up working with your health application in the iPhone as well. So it's warning you that it's going to share our diagnostics with Google to help improve the application. It's going to ask you for GPS information, so I'm going to allow it. It's going to ask to track your heart rate, which I'm going to allow it to do as well. So on the back of the watch, it's got a little heart rate sensor. And then it'll allow information on vital signs based on working with the heart monitor. I guess some more advanced watches actually check out blood oxygen levels as well. Then it checks out your profile for your height and your weight. And then it also counts your steps and gives you heart points. So it actually works off of your heartbeat, your steps, your activity, and then it sets a specific heart rating. And then it gives you some goals to work with. So once that's all set up, you press got it, and now it does the Breathe application, just like I said, like it does on the WatchOS with the Apple. And you can set some Fit goals in here. And the nice thing is if you ended up deleting information from the watch, you download or you get another watch, it'll all carry over to the new watch as well. You have Fit Workout, and there's a lot of activities that it throws in here for you. My workouts, so it'll track the workouts that you've done. If you do any of these workouts that are listed here, it's really easy to use them as quick set, or you can go into other workouts. So the fitness apps, they're pretty good. They could use some improvement, but I'll tell you what, they just bought Fitbit out, so I'm sure that that's only going to keep getting better with future updates. I believe that's stuff that they've promised anyway. Google Pay, we already went over that in the smart settings. It's basically just putting your financial information so you could use it. Reminders, for some weird reason, it's just not working. I tried to activate it on my phone. I've had it from the beginning. It does the same thing, so I don't know if that's just a specific Android, but it just doesn't seem to work really well, unfortunately. Google Translate, that's a really cool feature too, and I'll show you. Basically, you could switch it from any language. There's tons of languages in here that you can mess with. Same thing with To. I typically keep it in Spanish, and then you could move it back and forth. I have coworkers that speak Spanish, so what you're able to use the app for is, for instance, I'll show you how to use it right here. How do I get to the movies? So it translates it onto the screen, but the nice thing is if I put the watch out, it makes it bigger, so this way it's easy for them to read. And then the nice thing is that's where you would reverse it and be able to have them talk into it and translate it back. So that's where that comes in. All right, so that's my walkthrough on WearOS. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. If you just purchased a new watch or if you're thinking of purchasing it, I hope it's a lot of information to go through, so this way you can kind of be proficient with it right off the bat. It's a great little platform. I like the fact that they're getting a lot of different good quality manufacturers on board with working with it. I enjoy it a lot. I think it's a great system that works with iOS outside of watchOS, of course. I'm actually going to try to acquire an Android phone at some point, so this way I could kind of do a walkthrough on how well it works with Android. I'm also going to try to get other watches from different manufacturers so you can see how each one works with the WearOS system. So thank you again for watching. I really appreciate all the support. If you like this video, please press the thumbs up. If you like my page and my channel, please subscribe. You can also find me at Twitter at DougFNJ. Thank you so much for all the support over the years. Stay safe and have a great day.